The History of Bloodbending. Bloodbending is a subskill of waterbending that allows an extremely advanced waterbender to take hold of and manipulate fluids within an organism's body, allowing the bender to move the person's muscles. This technique is referred to as the darkest, most powerful, and most feared of all bending techniques, and it is the only art known to endanger the user's mental state. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over the history of bloodbending. Before we begin, we publish new content every week, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Discovery. After being captured during one of the Fire Nation raids aimed at weakening the Southern Water Tribe, Hama, along with her fellow waterbenders, was sent to a maximum security prison in the Fire Nation, designed specifically to hold benders of her kind. There, the guards were cautious of providing prisoners with any form of bendable substance that they could utilize in making a reprisal, going so far as to chain the limbs of the prisoners before they were allowed to drink, and using cruel retribution at any sign of resistance. Despite the helplessness she faced while imprisoned, Hama was able to feel the enrichment provided to her by the full moon. She began to devise a plan that would lead to her escape and eventually realized that the elephant rats constantly scurrying around the bottom of her cage were filled with bendable water. Upon the arrival of the next full moon, Hama attempted to take hold of the fluids within one of the creatures and she succeeded, successfully performing bloodbending for the first time. In the following months, enhanced by the full moon, she continued to develop the technique, mastering it to a point at which she could effectively control the movement of an entire horde of rats. During the next full moon, Hama used bloodbending to control a passing guard, forcing him to open her cage and allow her to escape. Hama walked free for the first time in many years and eventually settled in a village near the outskirts of the Fire Nation archipelago. Hama. While imprisoned, Hama developed a deep hatred for the Fire Nation, and she vowed to take revenge at every instance possible. She created a makeshift prison underneath a mountain and formulated a plan where she would control unsuspecting Fire Nation villagers and lead them to the prison during a full moon. She used this technique and eventually imprisoned the owner of a quaint little inn. Hama became the inn's proprietor and was able to repress accusations of being the one responsible for the disappearances by disguising herself as a sweet old innkeeper. During one of those nights, she planned to imprison an old man, Ding. The plan was initially successful, and Ding felt helpless as he was possessed by an unknown force. He was slowly led to the top of the mountain, but before he could be imprisoned inside a cave, the sun began to rise and the power that Hama held over him quickly faded. Regaining control of his body, Ding sprinted away from the scene. He remained the only villager to ever avoid being captured by the bloodbender. Katara. During the summer of 100 AG, Team Avatar decided to camp near a Fire Nation village. However, Hama overheard them telling horror stories and deducted from Katara's story about Nini that they were from the Southern Water Tribe and offered the group a place in her inn. Upon discovering an old whale-tooth comb in Hama's attic, she revealed herself to be a waterbender from the Southern Water Tribe and proposed to teach Katara some original Southern Tribe waterbending techniques so that she could pass on the knowledge of the Southern customs before her death, to which Katara happily agreed. Katara spent the next day learning various techniques from Hama, such as bending moisture from the air and water from within plants, including fire lilies when no bodies of water were present. Hama told Katara that she would teach her the ultimate waterbending technique at night during the full moon, when their powers were at their peak. Katara was hesitant, claiming that villagers had been disappearing during the full moon, though Hama seemed unaffected, stating that two master waterbenders under a full moon had nothing to worry about. That night, Hama took Katara to the forest where she explained her imprisonment and discovery of bloodbending. Katara was horrified and refused to learn the art when Hama urged her. This angered Hama, who used bloodbending to control Katara. The young waterbender pleaded for mercy, but Hama refused to release her. Feeling the power of the moon enforce her waterbending as well, Katara honed her energy and broke free, stating that her own bending was more powerful than Hama's. The two began to duel, and Katara almost immediately took the upper hand. Having discovered the truth about Hama from the villagers she imprisoned deep within the mountain, Sokka and Aang arrived soon afterward to aid Katara and told Hama to surrender since she was clearly outnumbered. Hama refused and used bloodbending to control them. Like a puppet master, she used them to attack Katara, though the young waterbender managed to avoid being hit. Adopting a different approach, Hama maneuvered Aang toward Sokka, who had raised his sword. Katara, in an attempt to save Aang, used bloodbending to stop her, effectively breaking Hama's hold on the boys. She released the elder following the arrival of Toph and the freed villagers, who escorted Hama away from the scene. Now apprehended, Hama congratulated Katara on becoming a bloodbender, causing the young waterbender to break down into tears. Sometime later, when Zuko and Katara went to search for the man who killed Katara's mother, Katara, overwhelmed by rage and grief, used bloodbending to subdue the Southern Raiders commander despite her moral objections against using the dark art. Yakone. Following the end of the 100-Year War, knowledge regarding bloodbending became widespread, and with Katara's involvement, the United Republic of Nations outlawed the bending art sometime before 128 AG. Regardless, a man named Yakone had the unique ability to use bloodbending without the need of a full moon, and used this skill to rule Republic City from its rotten underbelly, becoming the city's most notorious criminal malefactor in a matter of years. Following many acquittals in his favor, since it was considered impossible for one to bloodbend without the full moon, Yakone was eventually tried and arrested for multiple counts of bloodbending, for which the United Republic Council found him guilty. As he was condemned to life in prison, Yakone subdued the entire courtroom by using psychic bloodbending, rendering every individual unconscious before he escaped. Avatar Aang, who was also rendered unconscious by Yakone's bloodbending, roused himself by entering the Avatar state and gave chase to the convict. Forced to defend himself, Yakone took hold of Aang with bloodbending once more with lethal intent, but the Avatar broke free after entering the Avatar state a second time and trapped Yakone in an earth cone. With the criminal unable to move, Aang removed his bending, ending his reign as the head of Republic City's criminal empire. Noatak and Tarlok. At some point, Yakone managed to escape successfully and fled from Republic City to the Northern Water Tribe, surgically altering his appearance to conceal his true identity. There, he met and fell in love with a local woman, whom he later married. The two went on to raise two sons, Noatak and Tarlok, both of whom were waterbenders. Yakone, fueled by hatred for the Avatar for stripping him of his bending abilities, began training his sons in the art of bloodbending through frequent hunting trips. With time, the two waterbenders became increasingly proficient in the art, eventually learning to use bloodbending without the need of a full moon. Noatak exhibited prodigious skill in the art form and mastered Yakone's psychic bloodbending technique by the age of 14. In order to push their abilities to their peaks, Yakone forced both of his sons to bloodbend one another. Although Noatak willingly complied with his father's orders and bloodbent his younger brother into submission, Tarlok refused to do the same, repulsed by the idea of controlling his brother and making him feel helpless. Yakone was infuriated, making a move to harm Tarlok before he was stopped by Noatak, who immobilized him with bloodbending. Noatak asked Tarlok to run away with him and begin life anew, but the younger refused, prompting Noatak to leave into the wilderness by himself. Sometime later, Noatak discovered how to use bloodbending to block off chi paths and thus disable a person's bending ability permanently. Tarlok. Though Yakone no longer trained him following Noatak's presumed death, Tarlok ended up following in his father's footsteps and taking over Republic City, doing so from a political standpoint by becoming a councilman. In 170 AG, Tarlok revealed his true identity as a bloodbender during an altercation with Avatar Korra in City Hall, using the art to subdue her before she could finish him off with fire blasts. Tarlok knocked Korra out and imprisoned her in a cabin outside of Republic City, covering his tracks by attributing the abduction to an Equalist attack. However, his lies about Korra's disappearance were uncovered by Team Avatar Lin Beifong and Tenzin, forcing him to use his bloodbending abilities once again to evade arrest. Shortly after fleeing Republic City, Tarlok was confronted by Noatak in the disguise of Amon, who stated that it was time that Tarlok was equalized. Declaring that the Equalists had not faced a bender like him, Tarlok proceeded to use bloodbending to immobilize his assailants, subduing all but Amon himself, much to his surprise. Only slightly affected by Tarlok's hold, Amon made his way toward Tarlok before removing his bending. Shortly after, Tarlok recognized the sensation he felt as Noatak's bloodbending hold and realized that Amon was none other than his brother. During Korra and Mako's mission to find and confront Amon, the two ran into Tarlok, who was locked in an attic on Air Temple Island due to his knowledge of Amon's identity. Tarlok proceeded to reveal that Amon was his brother and suggested that he somehow blocked bending through the use of bloodbending. This ability helped him become the leader of the anti-bending revolution, as he claimed that the spirits granted him with the special ability to take bending away. Amon. Planning to expose Amon and undermine his revolution, Korra and Mako infiltrated Amon's rally at the pro-bending arena, where Amon announced that he would rid the world of airbending forever, revealing he had captured Tenzin's family. Korra and Mako used firebending to free the airbenders and opted to stay behind to create a diversion while Tenzin and his family escaped. Korra hid behind a table in an abandoned gym, where she was pulled out from hiding by Amon's bloodbending. As she was suspended in midair, Mako emerged and attacked, but was quickly overpowered by Amon's bloodbending as well. Finally, having subdued the Avatar, Amon removed her bending. Unknown to Amon, The lieutenant had followed his leader and witnessed his bloodbending. Branding Amon to be a traitor, the lieutenant attacked but was stopped by bloodbending. Amon told the lieutenant that he had served him well before launching him into a pile of timber. The interruption dealt with, he walked past the now weakened Korra to approach Mako and started to bloodbend the firebender into position, but Mako managed to point his fingers toward Amon and fired a lightning attack that electrocuted the Equalist leader and hurled him away, allowing Mako to take Korra into his arms before fleeing out into the corridor. Shortly after, Mako was forced to stop again by Amon, who caught up to them. Amon bloodbent the firebender, slamming him against the ceiling, the floor, and the two walls on his sides, before bloodbending him into position, stating that it was almost a shame to take away the bending of someone so talented. Korra's desperation for Mako to avoid suffering the same fate, in tandem with a strong desire to protect him, allowed her to break through her spiritual block and perform airbending. She began to attack Amon with consecutive air punches, forcing him back to the window at the end of the corridor. Amon retaliated and used bloodbending to subdue Korra, but she was able to resist his hold, launching a powerful air kick toward Amon, blasting him out the window and into the sea. After his instinctive use of waterbending exposed him as a bender, Amon fled into exile with his brother, only for a repentant Tarlok to detonate the boat they were on, killing them both and leaving Katara as the last living person known to be capable of bloodbending. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.